The opioid epidemic in Appalachian, Pennsylvania, specifically Beaver County, has disproportionately affected the stakeholder citizens within this fault line, and organizations such as the Rural Health Model Association and American Medical Association must make greater efforts to individually address its unique impeding factors. Rural citizens have less access to healthcare and treatment options. Pennsylvania has the second highest population of rural citizens, sitting at 1,440,892 documented citizens in these areas. Acknowledging the prevalence of manufacturing economics and the poverty line that many sit under for these communities ties into several detriments they experience, such as the environmental impacts, unemployment, the healthcare system, internet access, and education. Rural at a Glance, written by Elizabeth Dobas et al., provides a detailed background on many of these issues, specifically illustrating that persistently poor rural counties tend to be more ethnically and racially diverse, reinstating not only the rural-specific issues, but the hierarchy of racism within the United States, and how diverse communities are typically the most underserved. This is reflected by the fault line of Beaver County, which sits in the western Appalachian region of Pennsylvania, where many of these sentiments echo. Along with these issues, there is an increased stigma surrounding addiction and mental health in Appalachian communities, which can be attributed to other issues researched within the realm. In Jessica Thompson et al.'s Drivers of Opioid Use in Appalachian, Pennsylvania, Cross-Cutting Social and Community-Level Factors, multiple interviewees highlighted the attitude and misunderstandings that arise between interventionists, treatment providers, and addicts. The emphasis on medical attention for opioid users has also caused tension to grow within these communities, as emergency medical attention is more strained in rural areas with smaller police departments and hospitals. These varying opinions on addressing the opioid epidemic stem from many different places according to these residents. While some cite themselves as being old-fashioned recovery types of guys as the reason for their apprehension to new treatment methods, others simply acknowledge the lack of education around harm reduction or the lack of resources in the area becoming strained. This is exacerbated further by the outside stigma that Appalachian faces, as demonstrated in What is Appalachia from 90.5 WESA, a local news source in the fault line. Many who live in counties such as Beaver and Allegheny, but above the poverty line or within suburbia, reject that they are factually Appalachian. The opioid epidemic affects not only individual health, but the health of communities as a whole, which inevitably feeds back into the issue. In research, 3 emerging themes influence the high rates of drug use and overdose within rural Pennsylvania: acceptance of use and denial of harm by family and social norms, impacts of economic shifts and lack of community engagement, and coping with overall structural disadvantages and social depression. In rural Pennsylvania, especially Appalachian regions like Beaver County, many families span multi-generations in the area from the industrialism age to today. This has led to an environment in which nearly everyone knows everyone, something that could be and is attributed by Thompson to the almost normalization of drug use. Individuals she interviewed stated that everyone knows someone who uses, and is repeated by local stakeholders in WPXI's article, Beaver County Pushes to Overcome Opioid Epidemic. These factors are further looked into by Grinspoon, who highlights how they can make addiction more deadly. The unique challenges and the effects of government intervention have been demonstrated by studies of actual rural residents, specifically a group of stakeholders in the Appalachian region of rural Pennsylvania and Beaver County. While generally rural and Appalachian Pennsylvanians do not express a complete disdain towards the harm reduction efforts that governmental agencies have made, there is a clear divide as to what needs are being met and what needs the residents still see. Many rural areas lack immediate access to health care, whether it be caused by financial or geographical constraints leading to this issue. Aside from this, there are many stressors pushing people towards mental health issues and addiction that are pervasive in rural communities, whether it be underfunded education systems, increasing boredom as the economy declines and businesses dwindle, and high rates of unemployment and persistent poverty. As the authors put it, the participants connect the economic and structural decline in their community, a continuing issue in many Appalachian and non-urban communities, with the increase of opioid use. In 2021, several grants were awarded by the Beaver County government in order to fund risk reduction and education surrounding opioids and addiction, fundamental movements towards lowering the rates of addiction, as demonstrated in several studies surrounding the epidemic nationwide.
It's sad that Beaver County is third worst or worse, unlike every category.
The synthetic opioid fentanyl attributed to nearly 2,400 deaths in the state, more than half of all drug overdose deaths last year. Among the 102 individuals who died in Beaver County last year, 78 of them had fentanyl or a fentanyl-related compound in their system.
I think it goes back to the blue-collar, steel worker workforce that we have in Beaver County, where we have a very high rate of people who work in industries that involve a risk of injury. There's a very high percentage of employees who go on workers' comp for a work-related injury They're prescribed opiates, and they never return to work.
The same category of stakeholders active in addressing the issue are the same who started it: healthcare providers, pharmaceutical companies, and governmental agencies. Two of the major stakeholders in this unceasing epidemic that rural Pennsylvania faces, the American Medical Association and the Pennsylvania Rural Health Model, being funded by the Pennsylvania government, have made several moves to attempt to alleviate the suffering and mortality caused by their own previous actions. While the historical context may point to healthcare providers and government as the beginning of the issue at hand, current-day events have demonstrated that these officials do finally acknowledge their part in aid for their patrons and citizens. The new research and accompanying strides made in improving addiction medicine and access to healthcare reflect the major shift in how the opioid epidemic is being handled throughout the whole country as the serious detriment it has always been. These strides include the issue of geographical location for quality treatment, leading to the proposal of the Rural Health Model in the first month of 2017 and its implementation in 2018. This model aimed to give aid to rural hospitals in order to improve the quality of their care and their accessibility to rural patients. The Support Substance Use Disorder Prevention that promotes Opioid Recovery and Treatment Act was also established in 2018, which aimed to provide access to opioid treatment in areas of high need and allow for Medicare coverage. With all this, new state laws also mandate that a treatment center must be at least a 30-minute drive from patients. The drive time is extended to a minimum of 60 minutes for rural counties, however.
Jason Coopy, co-owner of the Way Fruit Farm in Port Matilda, says healthcare can be a big issue for farmers and others in small towns who aren't always close to a physician and may not be able to afford medical care.
Expanding upon the new strides and studies that have been done, both the Pennsylvania Rural Health Association and the American Medical Association have recognized the importance of addressing the opioid epidemic in rural Pennsylvania, and both have taken steps to support addiction treatment and prevention efforts within the fall line. To address the specific challenges that areas such as Beaver County pose, the Pennsylvania Rural Health Association has advocated for increased funding for addiction treatment centers and expanded access to telemedicine, which can provide remote addiction treatment to people in rural areas. This funding came in the form of the Rural Health Model, which specifically allocates funding to rural hospitals, as well as improvements made to Medicare's flexibility in addiction care. The explicit concerns and understanding demonstrated by the Pennsylvania Rural Health Model and Pennsylvania Rural Health Association have proved successful thus far by their standards. The American Medical Association has also taken a multifaceted approach in addressing the opioid epidemic, which includes, but is not limited to, promoting evidence-based prescribing guidelines, increasing access to addiction treatment, and supporting policies that address social determinants of health that contribute to addiction. Similar to the state-level intervention of the Rural Health Model, the American Medical Association works directly with healthcare providers and medical researchers in order to address the issue at hand. By practicing an understanding of rural residents' needs and concerns, these Pennsylvania government organizations work with these communities to provide targeted and effective medical care. The language used by varying stakeholders may breed confusion in the translation of medical and governmental jargon to real-world applications and effects, but in the end, all have the shared ideology of helping citizens in and outside of their own subgroup. The opioid epidemic has had a particularly devastating impact on rural communities in Pennsylvania, and stakeholders such as the residents within rural Pennsylvania and Beaver County, the Pennsylvania Rural Health Association, and the American Medical Association have played an important role in addressing the issue. The strong cultures that fester within rural and Appalachian Pennsylvania fault lines, such as Beaver County, may make it more difficult for individuals within it to seek help. Yet, their distrust is rooted in the long history of Pennsylvania and the country as a whole overlooking rural citizens' struggles and needs, and instead stigmatizing their subcultures and ideologies. By cultivating an understanding of the mindset and practices of rural individuals, not only can the stakeholders involved in the opioid epidemic work more effectively towards a solution, but a further respect between the people in Pennsylvania can grow and accept those still living in rural Appalachian cultures like Beaver County. Ultimately, we must all take a step back and make a greater effort to individually address the unique, impeding factors that influence the opioid epidemic in Pennsylvania. While a majority of the research available focuses within cities and metro areas, this issue alone has revealed a multitude of underlying, crucial problems that rural communities face.